Welcome to the Early Education Conversation, where we explore the transformative power of early learning through conversations with educators, thought leaders, and members of our community.
So my guest today is Dr. Sandra Munoz, and I have known Sandy for years, and we're not going to say how many years because we might start to age and date ourselves. But funny story about Sandy. First of all, you should know Sandy is the CEO of the Children's Healing Institute. She's also an author of a series of children's book called Fiddlesworth, which I've read, and it's awesome. So if you haven't read it, go out and buy it. And on top of all of those things, she's a psychologist. And how I met Sandy was we were at the Department of Children and Families, and I was a foster care counselor, and Sandy was our therapist.
Right. I worked at that time, it was called Parent-Child Center, which is now Community Partners.
Exactly.
Everybody started there back in the day.
And Sandy has a different version of how she met me, and I have a different version of how I met her. But long, tall, and short of it is that Sandy had the story she told me. We were talking, and she says, children experience life based on what they see. And then, I don't know how the story came around, and we were talking about Disney. And she goes, well, for instance, our kids don't know what Disney is. They don't know that Mickey Mouse isn't real. They don't understand any of this. And that spawned Sandy and I taking 45 foster children on a bus to Disney. So
Talk about the red tape that came along with that.
I know. and it was phenomenal because Disney gave us all the tickets for free.
We got the bus for free.
We got the bus for free.
Remember Miss Capernia Cannon?
Yes.
I know she is still around, and she's still a huge advocate.
She's at Lutheran Services Florida. She helps them.
There you go. And well, she got us the bus, and then she got us the food for free from the sub place. I can't remember.
And then we took a nurse from CMS.
Yes. Yes.
Because we had medically fragile children as well.
We did. We had that time we had children diagnosed with AIDS, remember?
Yeah.
And they all had matching shirts on with glitter on their back.
And we went to Disney.
Them.
And so that's like a story that I tell all the time because it defines, my journey through social work and kind of how I met you.
Yep.
So speaking of social work and our journey through education, what does early learning mean to you?
Early learning is just such a broad term, but if I think about it based on a mother and a child or a parent, we are their first teachers. And I think that's what early learning means to me, is you are really the first teacher to your child. So if that comes, through bonding by reading or nurturing or holding or just doing activities, your children are watching you from the get-go, and that's where learning starts, is at birth, at that moment. So that's what it means to me.
That definitely defines what we do at the Early Learning Coalition, right? Is understanding that a child's parent is their first teacher, right? And so everything that comes along with that. People think early learning starts at age 4 because it's pre-K and you're testing. But early learning starts even before they're born, right? And
we know the brain is just maturing at rapid rates at the birth of a child, right? And just what they're learning from their environment and the sensory and the stimulation. And, that's why reading to your baby is so important. Doing activities with your infant is so important because all of that is stimulating them. They're learning right then and there. And we also know, obviously, the side effect of trauma and how it can change the brain, because all of that is making a difference in how they're developing, and it's long lasting.
Yeah, so, speaking of trauma, you mentioned trauma, and I remember that you had many years working at the pediatric oncology support team. And so tell me a little bit about children with medical needs and how that affects learning, and how does trauma show up in children like that?
Well, first, it's traumatic for the parent, so we'll start there. It's like the parent got hit with a Mack truck. The minute you're sitting in the doctor's office and they're telling you, your child has cancer, a parent sometimes goes to, oh my gosh, my child is going to die. They start thinking the worst because they're grown, they know, and they've seen people maybe, suffer the harsh consequences of that kind of a journey. For children, they really don't have a lot of concept of what that is unless they've seen it in a family member, they've heard about it through their parents. So kids really take their cues from their parents when they are facing that. And I just remember having a discussion with the families when they were being given the news of, it's okay to cry and it's okay to have your meltdown because you deserve to, but you do it when you're not around your child. When you're with your child, the message is, we're going to get through this. You're going to be great. It's all going to be good. And obviously the journey, depending on the kind of cancer for the kids, it's different for every child. If they have a brain tumor, if they have leukemia, the treatment is different, the journey is different, the outcomes are different, and how they're feeling are different. But the one thing, and education obviously is going to be different too. They all have to be homeschooled because you don't have an immune system, so you're not going to go to school, you're going to get homeschooled. So that's going to happen at home where the teacher's coming to you. That kind of gets set up differently. And then you have the process of when they're returning to school and what that looks like. But obviously the medication that they're being given, depending on the meds, it can affect children differently. That's why it's really important that if a child is facing that kind of journey, if they can get a baseline on their testing, where are they at the point before they started the medications, or right off the ground, because at least you have something to compare it to afterwards, especially if you have a child that has a brain tumor, or the child that's on some really harsh chemo's, because it can affect learning later on and what they're dealing with. And at least you have the knowledge base of saying, okay, this is where we were beforehand, this is where we are now, how do we support our child, where they are currently. But I have seen so many children just blossom, after going through that journey and just doing amazing things, going to college, having a normal life.
Right.
I've sadly seen, the opposite, where I've shed many, many tears, and it's tough on the parents, and my heart goes out to those families. But kids are strong.
Yeah, you talk about strength and resilience in children, and so I wonder, where is that intersection of strength and healing and resilience for children? Like, when you think about those three things, strength, healing, and resilience, where does learning intersect in all of that?
They're going to learn that really from their family, from their parents, how they deal with a crisis. You're going to turn to those people who are your role models, right? How do I handle this? I'm going to look to my mom or dad to tell me how I'm supposed to deal with this. And a lot of that sometimes comes from the family. Sometimes it just takes that one person, that mentor. Sometimes it takes the mentor, that special person in the community, the village that's raising the kids, because sometimes kids do come from dysfunctional homes. And if they have that role model that can show them how to deal with a crisis appropriately, whether it's emotionally or action that they have to take or what they need to do, it really comes down to who are the people in my inner circle that I can learn from, or I can model after.
Right. Dr. Nadine Harrisburg calls it the adverse childhood experiences.
Yes.
And there's a whole, theory behind that intersection of adverse childhood experiences and that one adult who can change all of those things, right? So, the other thing that I pick up from what you're talking about is what we talk a lot about, is that learning is less about understanding the letters and the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s, and more about understanding the relationships that builds your capacity to learn. And so when you were talking about relationships with your parents and how children are watching their parent and taking their cues from parents, what I think about is the absolute necessity to have good, strong foundational learning through relationships. And so, I'll plug a little bit Dr. Isabel Howe at the Stanford Accelerator. She wrote a book called Love to Learn, and she brought that whole theory into practice and gave all of the data around how relationships help children learn. She's going to be here December 4th, I believe, at the Kravitz Center, and you should come.
Oh, I would love to.
Because it's going to be an amazing thing.
Yes.
I'm going to get you that book.
Okay.
The work that we do, we're getting our children starting anywhere from 6 weeks all the way to age 13. So we're doing quality out of school time, but also foundational learning, getting you to kindergarten. So our whole goal is getting you ready for school and ready for life. So when I think of what we're doing with babies, and I'm thinking about you being at a Healing Institute, tell me about the role the Healing Institute plays with babies and moms.
Well, the Children's Healing Institute, we work with families that have obviously premature infants. We work from 0 to 18 years of age. But the mission throughout our programs is the same, and that's really to ensure that children can grow up happy, healthy, and safe. And we do that by investing in the parents, because we know if you can create a solid foundation in the family unit, if you can change the way parents are role modeling for their children, and then you are establishing that difference in that child and creating a different life for that child and making a difference for generations that we may never get to see, but are benefiting because we invested in the family. with that child. So for our babies, we start in the NICU. And obviously that is a very stressful, traumatic time sometimes for families. They can be in there for many months. We have babies that are 23 weeks. Well, we know that mom is going to be in the NICU for 4 months, at least. And that's, if there's no medical complications going on. So what does that look like? Because we want to make sure that mom is able to bond with babies. And sometimes there's a limitation on how soon they're able to hold their baby, the kangaroo hold, because the baby, may have some other issues that they can't hold the baby right away. And sometimes there's guilt going on, even though it's never, mom's fault. There's still that issue. So we really focus on trying to find those ways that mom and baby can bond and they have that quality time together, whether it's reading or, us providing support to mom, so she understands their journey and helping her advocate in the hospital to understand what's going on with the baby, because that's another issue. You have all these medical terms and medical jargons going on, and a family member may not really get what's happening and understand everything, and that's where we come in to support the mom while they're in the hospital and when they transition home. So to ensure that we're doing the reading, we're doing the holding, we're understanding the developmental stages that a NICU child will go through as opposed to a full-term baby, because they're not going to hit all the milestones at the same time, but they do catch up, and it's understanding that process. So, which is really important developmentally for any parent with any child. You have to understand developmental milestones and expectations. Your 2-year-old may not be able to go and make himself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich when they're hungry.
Really?
We got to understand some things, the basics. So it's really helping parents through that journey. So they're able to feel confident, feel capable, and empowered, and have that assurance that they're creating that solid foundation.
One of the things we struggle a little bit with in our child care centers is with family engagement. And so you're talking a lot about that, engaging families in the work. What would be your advice to us on how to better engage families?
Well, for us, we were going into the homes. That's how we were able to engage, and we're meeting them where they are, right? So obviously, if parents have the stressors of, I have to pick up my kid from school, or I have to go do this, I have to go home, they're not going to want sometimes to go to anywhere additional. So we go to them. We're in the home, and we're there weekly, and we're there for an hour and a half, and we're working with them and teaching with them. The one thing I did learn from one of my workers that goes to one of the schools, we have a big Haitian population in Lantana. I think it's elementary school, one of the schools in Lantana, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name. But the issue was that a lot of the families don't understand a lot of the things on how they tell when they need to get additional help for their children. Is my child on spectrum? Does my child need additional services? So we're engaging that population by providing services in Creole and bringing them all together at the school when they're already there at a time that's convenient for their families, to provide them with some resources and information that they need on, how to know if your child, is on spectrum, or what services are available in the community. So for us, engaging families is about really meeting them where they are, when it's convenient for them, at a time that works for them. And sometimes that's not always possible to do it in the schools because, there's certain parameters.
Absolutely.
So we go to the home. And, if we have to be there on a weekend, we're there on a weekend.
That's awesome. I mean, you've given us so many nuggets of information around education, early learning, and building resilient children. So I'm amazed at that. So let me ask you, what's next for you?
What's next for me? Retirement.
For all of us.
For all of us, it's retirement. Continue to expand. I mean, as the Children's Healing Institute, our goal is to triple the size of the services that we're providing. So we want to triple the amount of staff we have doing our parent aid services that's going into the home. I need 3 more, staff members to work in my Teacup Pre-Med program to go to all the hospitals, because we have a waiting list. Because aside from just seeing the premature infants, we are working with any baby that's in the NICU. So that can be, different medical issues are going on. So, we're looking to expand on those services as well. And really just, like I said, our goal is to create change for generations we haven't seen. And if we can do that with the family that we're investing in now, I think the society as a whole will be better for it.
Right. So, we started full circle. We started with what does early learning mean to you, and what you just said about changing generations for the future is exactly what we're trying to do at the Early Learning Coalition, right?
Exactly.
Is making sure that children are ready for life and that the next generation is going to be even more ready. So thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.